What's going on YouTube? Culturedog Sam Hatch back with another video, and I figured I'd break free from Laserdisc for a moment to, actually this is tied into Laserdisc. This viewing was a direct result of me watching Bullet again, and kind of realizing how cool that flick was, and then thinking about the David Fincher connection from that, and that made me want to watch Zodiac, much to the delight of my fiance, who's a big fan of the film, and suggested that we watch it. And I've seen this Blu-ray countless times. It came out in 2009. It's a 2007 film. David Fincher's Zodiac. This is the 2-disc director's cut, which also came out on HD DVD. Right off the bat, the package is genius. It's a wraparound replica of one of the Zodiac's letters, including his handwritten, typo-ridden writing there. And one of his letters to the San Francisco Chronicle. And if you haven't seen it, it is a great film. James Ellroy, is also on one of the commentary tracks here and calls it one of the 10 best crime films in cinema history. And I fell in love with it seeing it in the theater. This director's cut is pretty cool. It does have a few extra moments, and it's not, salacious moments with extra violence and blood and stuff like that. The violence is very quick and to the point in this film, and does not like to go above and beyond like what is known from the police reports. In fact, a lot of when the crimes themselves happen, it's very, very accurate, and not interested in showing conversations that didn't take place or postulating what could have happened. In fact, the writer James Vanderbilt goes out of his way to only show the scenes where there was a witness, a surviving witness, or not all of the victims passed away. So it begins with everything about this film is amazing. Just about every shot is fantastic. From the opening scene where Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau go to a lover's lane scenario and are targeted by the Zodiac, and there's a number of other murders detailed in the film, including a Lake Berryessa attack, which is the most kind of surreal and terrifying moments in film history, where a couple, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, are kind of lounging on the side of a lake, and this creepy character, the Zodiac, as you've seen him probably sketched numerous times, comes out of the woodwork with this kind of executioner's hood, which lately has been posited as being possibly a direct copy of an Australian police outfit that was being used at the time and was being largely publicized in papers around the time of the Zodiac killings. But yeah, he comes out from behind trees with this bizarre get-up with rope and a gun, etc., and totally horrifying scene. And then also the murder of a cab driver named Paul Stein in San Francisco, and this film is great at kind of building up this scenario. And Robert Graysmith, who wrote a cartoonist at the Chronicle, who wrote the books that this film is based on, is just this kind of ancillary character for the first half of the film. So it's kind of fascinating like that. It's almost like an anti-Psycho. He doesn't even become a character until later on in the film. But it's great at setting up this scenario where this killer can verify that all these killings that this film dissects, verifies that those are his work, because he calls in and leaves tips and lets people know certain details about him. He writes letters and expresses detail that's not publicized outside of anything that the cops would know. And then later he actually has bloody shirt remnants that he's almost surgically removed from a victim that he sends with the letters. So it kind of establishes that scenario where there's a lot of outskirts killings and small towns where out in Vallejo and Napa Valley and where San Francisco is this kind of modern cosmopolitan metropolis isn't really that excited about what's going on out there. And then later in the film, it hits home. A person in San Francisco and the Presidio Heights is murdered. And this film is very, even starting out right off the bat, there's a bit of throwback imagery with the Paramount and Warner Brothers logos being the classic logos you may have seen in the early 70s. It's very classicist and is all about taking its time. It's not about shock or, or shock through easy methods or jump scares, etc. like that. And it's more of an obsession film. I definitely see it as a counterpart to Vertigo, and it's in fact structured similar to. It's almost like two movies, and this film clearly has like a demarcation point. There's a great kind of sonic collage about 2/3 of the way through, or maybe a little bit less than that, where it's just a black screen and you're left listening to these surround sound bits and pieces of pop culture swirling around you to show a passage of time. There's a lot of great passage of time moments in here, including a CG recreation of the Transamerica Tower, which is really cool. And it's just a very accomplished film. I was always a huge David Fincher fan. I kind of take offense to Roger Ebert's David Fincher's most insightful, involving film because, he's talking about something that's accepted and an acceptable adult film, as opposed to his stupid stuff with Fight Club and, The Game and Fiction and all that kind of stuff. So here's a nonfiction story. So therefore, this is an important film. And this is really the film that kind of vaulted David Fincher into, the critical eye. Hollywood actually accepted him. Fight Club didn't win Best Picture. Yeah, sorry, American Beauty was a cool flick and all, but Fight Club was absolutely the best film in 1999. So now, after the fact, now that he's doing things that are deemed acceptable, even though, David Fincher still has an eye to scar. If you've seen Gone Girl, there's a murder in there that's, completely harrowing, and he revels in it. And he may look like a kind of clean-cut, nice guy, but nobody drops an F-bomb like David Fincher does. If you hear it, it's just, sharp and, just ready to poke your eye out. And that's kind of like his filmmaking style. He may be very, very, very meticulous and has a great eye and everything like that, but he's also looking to scar, and he kind of always has been. And that's one of the things I appreciate about Fincher. So, I mean, if this was what it took, him doing something that's accepted as a grown-up tale to get him accepted into Hollywood, then so be it. And but Zodiac, it really is a masterpiece. It's this tale of obsession, like Vertigo. It also mirrors Vertigo in that the first half of the film is the sensational half. It titillates the audience, and it makes you fall in love with the kind of nostalgia of the late 60s and early 70s, the heightened tension, and the kind of, even though the reign of terror that the Zodiac waged through his letter writing campaign on San Francisco was legitimately like a horrifying moment when people thought their kids were going to get killed just riding the school bus. And even David Fincher remembers that as a child, which I think that personal recollection is what made him decide to make this film. So even though all that's going on, there's a lot of kind of verve and drive in those moments, and you get stimulated by it. And then when everything kind of stops, the killing stops, and you're just left in the wake of all this. And that's just like Vertigo. The first half, he's following this girl. She's fabulous. She's mysterious. There's a lot of strange stuff going on. It really stimulating the senses, and then it's all gone. And what you're left with is the obsession. And you, the viewer, are yearning for the first half of the film to come back, much like the protagonist is yearning for the events and the people, etc., and trying to recreate that. This is just the same way. It's like everything dries up. The Zodiac killer kind of goes into hiding and stops killing, but he starts taking credit for some killings, but nobody quite believes them. And what you're left with is this kind of obsession. And Robert Graysmith then steps into the limelight, portrayed by Jake Gyllenhaal in a great role in here. Robert Downey Jr. plays Paul Avery, who not as many people knew about, and there wasn't as much access to what he was like as a person. But the people that were alive when they made the film, Mark Ruffalo plays Detective David Toschi, and is just amazing. It changes tact, partially through the film, and is about nobody really cares about this anymore, and Robert Graysmith is still obsessed with it. He's a cartoonist who kind of trades in symbols, and was upset that there was a killer who used kind of his own symbology, who used that medium as a way to terrorize people, and was still thinking that somebody should write a book about it, and nobody was really interested in it. And he quickly connects with David Toschi, who still kind of wishes they could solve the case, and it's still an open case in a lot of different jurisdictions. Elias Koteas plays the Vallejo chief of police who helps out. Donald Logue is Ken Narlow, I think out in Napa, who helps out as well. And it quickly becomes more about, doing independent detective work and all the kind of cold dead ends that this leads down, and how your mind will come to its own conclusions, and then you're going to start detecting things the wrong way, like looking for the answers that you want to find. And there's even a great scene with Charles Fleischer that's hotly debated as to whether or not this film crosses a line into horror film territory, but it does illustrate that when you start chasing a serial killer, that you're going to start finding yourself down some dark alleyways and dangerous scenarios. And I loved how it kind of posited that a certain person, Arthur Lee Allen in this case, may have been the Zodiac killer, even though a lot of people say that for everything that he fits the profile well, there's another handful of things that don't fit at all, from his voice, etc., etc. But this film isn't really about who is the Zodiac killer. It's about not being able to know answers to things like that, and how do you deal with them. And it's about Robert Graysmith and what he believes, and so it's great. So there's no like real wrong moves the film makes, because they're right to the perspective of the character. And there's a few extra scenes, including a great scene with Toschi and his partner Armstrong, who are trying to get a search warrant for Arthur Lee Allen's trailer. And this great scene where they're kind of talking back to where they're kind of laying out this case to a Charlie's Angels-esque talk box on a desktop, and shows the intricacies of the police work and all the work they have to put into it. There's a lot of other short moments, like including Paul Avery kind of devolving into like this drunken behavior, and just a few things here and there, but really, really great stuff. The score by David Shire is amazing, very throwback, kind of like classical 70s style score. The special effects are amazing, and there's some special features on here that will show you that you never even realized a lot of the special effects took place. They're CG to recreate scenes. The stuff at the Presidio Heights at Washington and Cherry after the Paul Stein murder is just amazing, because it might be one of the most like technically unrealistic scenes in the film, because most of it is recreated on a soundstage in Downey, California. Yet it feels so real. The sound design is so amazing, and it just captures the spirit of an October night in San Francisco, and it is just like drenched with realism, even though it's largely artifice. And that stuff's amazing. You almost don't want to know how they did it, because it works so well. But yeah, there's great stuff on here. The first disc is a commentary-laden Blu-ray. Nothing too amazing on the inside here, but David Fincher does one commentary track. There's another commentary track, which is a lot of fun. It's got Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. in one recording session. The other recording session is with Brad Fisher and the producer, and James Vanderbilt, the writer, and James Ellroy, the writer, who is just a fan of the film. They even poke fun at him at one point. They're like, yeah, I wish I could get to a point in my life where I could just pop in on a commentary for a film that I just happen to be a fan of. And James Ellroy is a character, and again, this is not safe for kids. One, the subject matter of the film is disturbing enough already. But James Ellroy is this kind of foul-mouthed, brilliant character. And again, he's not just dropping swears because he wants to shock, or it's just he's so verbose. He drops these other kind of eloquent phrases. So he loves language, whether or not it's salacious language or erudite speech. He doesn't care. He's going to drop all these interesting word bombs in your conversation, and he seems to kind of evoke a response from James Vanderbilt, who kind of starts dropping F-bombs to much less effect than James Ellroy does. You can't help but listen to James Ellroy if he's just reading something out of the phone book. It sounds pretty cool. He's got this deep gravelly voice, but he definitely brings a vivacious spirit to the commentary track. I'm always intrigued as how when they have multiple commentaries, like Gyllenhaal and Downey, and then the writers in another room, writers and producers in another room, like how you layer those. And it must be a bitch to recreate that, and You know, because what if they both talk over the same portion? Like, how do you decide which person's commentary is better than another person's? And you probably have to shuffle it around to make sure they don't overlap, etc. But really good commentary tracks there. Then disc 2 has a lot of features, including some true crime documentaries. This is the Zodiac speaking. Is a great documentary from David Pryor, which is largely just interviews with survivors of Zodiac attacks and the police that were on the scenes, including the original murder that was not essayed within the film itself, and very exhaustive and far more like revealing and interesting than a lot of real, quote unquote Zodiac documentaries. There's also another documentary called His Name was Arthur Lee Allen, and whether or not you think Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac, it's still a fascinating documentary about him as a person and how kind of creepy he was. So that's fascinating. There's a really good piece about the visual effects, which I mentioned before, which are astounding in how simple they appear on screen, but are actually just very, very intricate. And then there's some previs stuff. David Fincher decided to do previs for the killing scenes, and that's out there. And then a behind-the-scenes documentary called Zodiac Deciphered, which is pretty fascinating. Unfortunately, it does have some deleted scenes found within it, like with Mark Ruffalo's character David Tusky and his partner addressing bus drivers as to what to do in case a scenario like the Zodiac laid out in his letters that he threatened actually played out, like is eventually shown in the Dirty Harry film. And then there was a few other deleted scenes that you saw throughout there, but the deleted scenes are not actually presented as a separate feature on here, which is too bad. That's one of the only things that I was disappointed on. It's got a Dolby True HD, and the soundtrack is amazing. It's got a lot of great period music from Carlos Santana and Donovan. And the film is structured so that it goes from more of a compressed mono feeling to more open in the surrounds later on in the film. David Fincher mentions that himself. There's some stuff that's changed and restructured, historically speaking, and David Fincher also cops to that in the commentary track. And but yeah, there's a lot of great information that's doled out. If you're a filmmaker, you're going to want to check out the commentary track. And if you're a Zodiac fan, you're going to want to check out the special features either way. So it's still just came out in 2007, so it's creeping up on 10 years old. It's still a fantastic film, and I think James Ellroy's right. It'll be lauded for decades to come and considered an official classic film. The picture is fantastic on this. Fincher's cinematography from Harris Savides, who I think had previously worked with him on The Game, is just fantastic. It's a lot of kind of orangey browns, that kind of typical Fincher style. And there's even a lot of like visual throwbacks to some previous films of his, like The Game and Fight Club, etc. But the shadow detail is just insanely amazing and just rich, and every frame on this thing is just pretty much like worthy of framing, to coin a phrase. But yeah, so highly recommend it. You've probably seen it 1,000 times by now, but I figured after revisiting this Blu-ray, it was worth just kind of dropping a few thoughts about it. So Zodiac, one of my favorite films, should be one of your favorite films. Check it out, pick it up on Blu-ray, and revel in the awesome. Cheers.